Yes, sir. What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Masculine Health Solutions podcast, where we are going to talk to David Nordel, a guy who knows a thing or two about combat, a guy that knows a thing or two about getting people back into their best and optimal health, even if they're on the battlefield, because he's got some experience there too. And a guy who's written a book, which I think could be really beneficial when it comes to basically taking all the life lessons that he's learned in his life and put it into a book where he can account into making your life better and now helping veterans. I'm honestly very proud to have this conversation with you, David. But first and foremost, before we jump into all that, how are you doing today?
CJ, I am max fab, baby.
You look like it, man. You look like a king. And
well, that's the whole, the whole predicate, in the book, and max fab and maximum fabulous is kind of the attitude. We can carry around a max fab attitude, man, and we own that, right? We get that attitude every day, and that actually relates to my combat time and leadership in combat, and I kind of coined that during my last combat tour, and I got laughed at a little bit, and they said, "Man, I've never heard a senior leader say I'm maximum fabulous." But if you really look at the concept of trying to get their attitudinally every day, it's just a good thing. So yeah,
100%. And that's the thing too that I noticed with your book and how you're helping veterans kind of make that transition, kind of going from basically one frame of mind and switching things up and coming into the world again. Almost, it seems like you do want to be max fab and making some of that transition. But I kind of want to dive into your story first and foremost. Where did it all begin with you?
Oh man, so you ask a military guy that, it all starts with I was born. So
yeah,
I'm a fourth generation Portuguese immigrant. So why does that matter? My family all immigrated across the United States and became dairy farmers. So I grew up in that environment and that world of farming, and it's very, very uber foundational. But as I grew, I had influential people in my life, family and otherwise, that had fought in World War II or even Vietnam, and always wanted to serve. Always been patriotic, and I believe in our country more than you all will know, as far as being fortunate. And as a kid, I hadn't seen a lot of the world. Actually, I had seen very little. But I knew that there was a big world out there that needed to be explored. And I always wanted to go in the military, and I wanted to go in the Navy and be a plumber. And two things happened. One was the Navy recruiter treated me pretty poorly on the day of reckoning. The Air Force recruiter put his arm around me, and before I knew it, I was off to the Air Force. And then the Air Force said, "You're not going to be a plumber. You're going to be a medic." And I had no idea. It's amazing how in life, if you let people help you that are have your best interest in mind, they're probably going to get you to a better spot than you think that you're going to in your mind.
Yeah.
And so some of that is you have got to have belief in the Lord Jesus Christ and understand that he's got the stick, and that can help you relax, and it actually makes you a lot healthier. There's a lot of, I wrote a book, but there is one book out there that's got the answers to all your problems. You just got, and in the Google world, just type your problem into Google and say Bible reference, and you're going to get some pretty cool words on how to work through things. Anxiety or stress or work or finances. It's all it's all figured out. But yeah, so I end up on this road in medicine, which took me all the way through, finishing my nursing degree and being a shock trauma nurse and those type of things, which is amazing. On the way, my wife of 32 years and a couple of boys, raised a couple of boys, and a 32-year military career that took me from being an airman, no stripes, to being a command chief, the senior enlisted leader for all the intercontinental ballistic missiles in the United States. And that's a whole bunch of things. Well, that was pretty cool. And for a medic to grow into leadership where it could be that diverse. And that's why I laugh when we're kind of picking our leaders for the country. We're going through that now with the new administration. And I laugh and people go, "He's not qualified." And I'm like, of course he's not qualified. It's like nobody would be a parent if there was qualification.
Yep, that's true.
If you resume on the table and said, "I want to have kids," nobody would hire you.
Mm-hmm.
not qual.
No, I think you're right when it comes down to that, because it does seem like sometimes you got to be immersed in the role and figure it out on the fly, and that's kind of what life is. I feel.
And get some help.
Yeah, yeah,
Stop traveling alone.
yeah.
Everybody out there, when they're really, really struggling, the first question I ask was, who's on your life team and who's helping you? And I will say 50% of the time, CJ, I get a blank stare.
Yeah.
Somebody looks at me like, and I'm like, do you know what I mean? And they're like, no, explain it. I'm like, you have to have a life team.
Mm-hmm.
If tomorrow you said, I need to move two 6-foot 2x4s simultaneously 8 feet apart. You can't do that by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to phone a friend, right?
Yep.
And the friend that's going to be good at helping you do that, that's going to probably show up because he's a good friend, he or she's a good friend. They're going to show up, right? And they're going to do a good job. You've already vetted those people. You don't even realize that.
Mm-hmm.
But we have problems in life, and you know what we do? We close the help book. We don't open it up, and we don't go through it for who. And it's all about ego, brother.
Yeah.
It's ego, and we let that get in front of it. We say, I'll take care of myself.
Yeah, and you know what the thing about ego too is that, dude, like I could talk about the subject for days, but I've been, the older you get too, the more you start to surrender yourself to the fact that I can't do it all by myself. And then you go and get help a couple of times and you realize you're like, this is a lot better. This is a lot easier and it's way more effective. Maybe I shouldn't try to figure out everything by myself and talk to a guy that specializes in this and get his opinion at the very least.
That's right. And when that happens, nobody jumps on Facebook and goes, CJ had to get help, nanny boo boo. But inside, fear and pain are the two things that drive us to inaction.
Mm-hmm.
If I said, CJ, let's go climb Mount Everest.
Yeah.
Right? That invokes fear and pain. You already doubt, right? Am I in good enough shape? Do I have the millions of dollars to do it? Do I have the time to, all those things? You and I could come up with 10,000 reasons why we can't climb Mount Everest. And then it's just a 5-second conversation and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start to take on each of those things and understand that you can accomplish them and what it takes to do that, and you have a plan, you doggone right, you could climb Everest.
Yeah.
So, or give it a doggone good shot. You got to be a little lucky to get to the top, but to give it a doggone good shot. So I only say that, especially to our male audience, I only say that because you won't see that when you're younger, unless you want to listen. I'm giving you a little bit of the playbook. It's in the book. I'm giving you a little bit of the playbook. Boy, if you can learn to let down your guard early on in life and just walk into people with your palms up and go, I have no idea what I'm doing. That's pretty liberating.
It is. And it's one of the most valuable lessons. Like, I got a 13-year-old boy and he's taking on basketball. He's taking on different sports. And I'm like, listen, son, you never played basketball before, right? But he joined the team and he made it. And I think it's mainly because he's 6'1" and he's 13, right? So I'm like, you're lucky in that department. However, now you got to develop the skills, right? And one of the best things that really impressed me is he came to me. He's like, I know you play basketball. Can you help me out? And I'm like, dude, sure. And that's the other thing that I think is super relevant in our society, or something that kind of gets overlooked, where people think that if they surrender themselves, ask for help, then nobody's going to help them. But ironically, the guy that usually knows his stuff in that field is usually like, dude, I would love to share the information that I have.
Knowledge this is in the book. And when I wrote this and then it got out there, a lot of people resonated with this. Knowledge is power only when shared. Well, all of your listeners out there that are subject matter experts, don't be hanging on to what you know. Don't be dying with it. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You need to get out and get in front of stuff and start sharing all of that stuff. It doesn't make you weaker. It makes you stronger.
Yeah.
And if you're leading an organization, share what you know. CJ, you obviously played sports, so that makes it easy. So did I. If you go back through your life, your formative years in your life, if you had to go back to maybe your early years in high school, let's not, senior year in high school is weird, but if you could go back to your freshman or sophomore year in high school or 7th or 8th grade, and somebody said, you're going to go back now, you can meet one person from that time frame, one individual, not the student, one individual from that time frame, to help you out in life, who would it be? 9 out of 10 people would pick some sort of coach, band teacher, something. They would pick somebody that coached them because they've seen them at their most vulnerable. They've seen them when they're weak and they don't know. And that person helped fill their gaps and said, stand here and stand that way. And the first person that taught you how to get into an athletic stance and guard somebody in front of you in basketball.
Yeah.
Those are the people that we resonate with, that we remember, that we stay in touch with.
Yeah.
So why at some point do we stop seeking out coaches and mentors? Why do we stop doing that and we think that we got to do it all ourselves?
I think it's more of an ego thing, to tell you the truth, because it's almost like as we get older, I think when you're a kid, it's kind of, you're okay with failing. And the older you get, you almost start lying to yourself more, and you start to insulate yourself in lies, and then you just want to protect your ego. And I know that happened to me, where it's just like, okay, you know, I could go ask for help, but I got this bodybuilding thing down pat. But I didn't do my first bodybuilding show really till like 2 years ago, but I've been doing it for well over 20 years now. And I could have been miles ahead if I had just hired a nutritionist or a dietitian earlier on, like in my 20s. But back in my 20s, I knew everything. So, you know, I didn't need one. It's ironic that now in my 30s, I'm like, I could use one.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, I guess we all have to come to that realization at some point. But if you look, you actually save time. We're always worried. We always want more time. Save time by getting help, right? We always want to be healthier. We want lower blood pressure. We want to feel good. By getting help, you have lower blood pressure and you feel good because you have somebody to help. And there's a guy that speaks. His name's Dan Clark. Dan's a motivational speaker. He's pretty renowned. I mean, he's been quite a few places. Major athlete, probably going to go in the NFL draft, playing at the University of Utah, linebacker. At practice, big hit, and he gets paralyzed on one side. Not permanently, but enough to where he's never going to play football again. And as you and I can imagine, he goes right into the guy ditch, right into the man. And, you know, he makes some bad decisions. Well, when he pulls himself out of this ditch, he says, you know what? I need to show people that there's another side of life. And one example that he gives is, if you sprain your ankle or hurt your wrist, and the doctor says, hey, all the bones are healed, you know, or the ligaments are healed or whatever, as best they can, but I need you to go home and I need you to move your ankle back and forth like this 7 times a day. And you go home and you do that, and you move it to when it hurts, and then you move it to when it hurts, and you just do it. Well, if you do that for months and months, your ankle's going to go as far as you push it. What happens when you go to the physical therapist?
Should be feeling a little bit better.
Right. But the physical therapist takes that ankle and goes, does that hurt? And you go, yeah. And then they go 2 degrees more and 3 degrees more.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't do that to yourself, do you?
No, yeah, you're right. When it comes to rehab.
Stretch and grow and get better at anything without help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so passionate about that, because I'll be honest with you, CJ, after coming out of my last combat tour and just a collective of my life, I mean, sometimes I feel like I've lived the life of 5 men or 5 women. Yeah, you know, when you pick up nursing as a profession, it's female dominant, and you learn a lot of things about the opposite sex that are very admirable, by the way. But I feel like I've lived the life of 5 people, but in there, man, I picked up PTSD, I picked up moral injury, which is, you know, lesser known, and I talk on that, but I tried to deal with all that myself, and all that ended up at, well, I had 3 friends. The first 3 friends that people associate with when they have PTSD or moral injury: Jim, Johnny, and Jack.
Oh, that's funny.
Hey, they're the most reliable. They always show up. They're readily available. They get you where you want to be. And in the morning, you got to make friends with them all over again.
Yeah.
It's a miserable existence, man. It's a terrible existence. And for me, it was a near-death experience for me to actually go, wow, you know, all of this stuff I've learned, and I've gotten help, and I've gotten better, and I've used people to help improve. And the one time in my life that I really, really, really needed it, where it was life threatening, needed the help, I figured I'd take care of it myself. Stupid.
Yes.
But I figured it out. And once I got help, it's been, I went from being a victim to being an owner. And,
Yeah.
when you stop saying things like it's somebody else's fault or this hadn't happened, and you do all this deflection and you go, hey, I own it.
Yeah.
So when I speak publicly, I start off the top. I have PTSD and moral injury, and I'm an owner of it, proud owner of it. And if you want to talk about it, let's talk.
Yeah. And to me, it's kind of like, I think that acceptance piece, or the acceptance piece, is probably the most important and the most difficult. Because, like, that first step to, like, getting to any destination, probably the most difficult, because you're like, well, shit, I'm headed in that direction. And if I do want to heal, I got to take this step. And to your point where you said you could just sit there, deflect, and, use every other excuse in the book and just be like, hey, listen, Johnny, you can walk. I'm just going to sit right here. Just do your damage inside of me. But what was the other actionable step after you came to the realization where, like, okay, I accept the fact that I need to take ownership of the situation that I'm currently in?
Well,
What did you do after? Who'd you reach out to? How did that kind of look initially?
So I think every veteran, when you leave the Department of Defense, I don't care if you've been to combat, if you served 4 years or 40 years, I think every veteran should have at least 2 visits with a mental health professional. Because there's so much that you don't know that's real. And if and when, and they will ask the right questions, it makes you verbalize those type of things. So, to answer your question is, you have to have the professional thing. You've got to have a professional in your life. The second piece is this redefinition of your life team, and building out your life team in a way that it's a two-way street. Far too often we let people on our life team and they're caustic. They're the people that are always telling you you're not getting it right. They're not contributing the other way. And those people usually look like brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, aunts. They're really inner circle people that they think because there's genetic bond, you get to be on my life team.
Yeah.
And I fired some. You talked to my oldest kid. I fired him for about 3 months. I just called him one day and I said, you're off my life team. I said, we're not going to have any more conversations about anything substantive because you're sucking off of me and I'm not getting anything in return.
Yeah.
And he called me. We had a long conversation, and he said, he goes, I was so mad at you for 3 days. And he goes, and then I had this realization that you were taking care of you. And I said, yeah. And he goes, and that was okay. And I said, yep, I'm done. I'm done being labeled as selfish because I take care of me. Because I can't do anything at a productive rate for anybody else unless I'm taken care of. So, there's a balance there. So you really got to define your life team. And I don't know how you do that, but when your life changes, when your goals change, you have a 13-year-old now. I can imagine, I've got a pretty good idea of what you focus on for him and for your relationship.
Yeah.
That's change in about 4 years. When he starts to hit the late teens and that high school thing, the relationship's going to change a little bit. If he goes to college or goes to trade school or goes out into the world and just gets into the labor market, whatever he decides to do, or ends up playing basketball, your relationship's going to change. And then your kids turn 25 and their frontal lobe's fully developed, and then they start having adult conversation, and then your relationship changes. Well, you're changing at all of that time. That life team changes. Some people are on the close inner circle, and sometimes they back off and they're on the outer circle. And you have to pull other people in circle because those are the people that are contributing to your journey and this thing that we call life. So a life team isn't static, and you've got to build the right life team. So you should always be evaluating your situation. You should always be evaluating who's contributing, either negatively or positively, to your growth and development. And you need to nurture the relationships that are positive. And then you have to make a tough decision, CJ, to cut the cord with the negative one.
Yeah. And to your point, one of those, it's tough, but you're right. It's sometimes people feel that because they have that genetic bond to you, they can treat you any which way. And even in my life, I've had to do that where it's like, well, you might be my sister, but you're kind of fucked up. I kind of got to back away.
Yeah, you gotta roll on over here to the side and let me be.
Yeah.
How many times do you see a mother take a young kid and go, you got to pick better friends.
All the time.
Right? And you go, oh, no, he's fine, and you run off, and the next thing, phone rings, and you're in trouble because they shoplifted, right?
Yeah.
Now, what all your mother is really saying is the team that you have around you is going to grow you, make you better, and it actually is your reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see, you can watch. Oh, I love watching older ladies. They'll watch young kids, and they'll look at them and they'll go, "Oh, those 4 boys, I know their parents. Those are good kids. Those are good." Right? Where the opposite.
Yeah.
And what I want is your kid to be in that other group. Well, this is no different. You're trying to teach them those skills early on of how to pick and choose. But because somebody's fun or somebody's charismatic or they're doing the cool stuff or they got the right sneakers or the right hat, this is all danger stuff, right? For your kid, right sneakers, right hat, and those kind of things. No, Dad, he's cool, man. He's fine. And you're like, oh no, he's bad news. And then you go, I told you.
Sure enough. Yeah, it's funny as you're talking about that, dude. I can think of about 4 different situations where that's come up. And to your point, going back to the life team situation where he's got a cousin where he's always in trouble, and like I said, those family issues where sister made some bad decisions, and that kind of carried over into life with this one kid. And I'm like, you're not hanging out with him. He's like, but he's fine. I'm like, nah, he's not, and he's been suspended, expelled, and I'm like, you're not mixing in with that, right? And again, it might seem like a tough decision at first, but at the end, later on, when he saw, when he was even the victim of the same bullying that came from said cousin, he's just like, okay, no, you're right. You're right. I don't want to hang out with him anyways.
Yeah. But see, you're on his team.
Yeah.
Because if you left him to his own vices, that's not what he did.
Yeah.
So why can't you do that when you're 50, man?
Oof, yeah.
Why can't, when you're 50, why, I'll be 60 years old in July. Why now do I talk about life team and who's on my life team and where they're at?
Mm-hmm.
If people on your life team, these are not people that you have to talk to every day.
Yeah.
These are people that have a life resume, that care about you, that want to contribute to your life. And you can pick up the phone without having talked to them for 4 months and say, I need you to pray for me. I need you to show up. Can I borrow something? Whatever it is, right? Can I have coffee and sit down? Can I cry in front of you? There's a whole chapter in the book about people cry on the farm. And the most damaging thing that I did going through my combat time was I refused to cry because I was in a senior leadership position and I thought it would be a sign of weakness. It was wrong. It was a wrong decision then.
Yeah, because I guess keeping all that emotion in, I mean, I've been in situations now, and I'll be completely transparent, especially when it's related to your kids, where, somebody starts cutting onions in the car and I got to deny it, plausible deniability, but you are right. It's no good to actually hold on to those emotions. But when was it that you felt that you were liberated almost to just let your emotions out? Because I imagine that must have been a process, right?
I'll give you the exact moment. But first of all, here's your thing, CJ. When you're crying, you just say, hey, Dad doesn't cry. His eyes just sweat sometimes.
Yeah. I like that. I'm stealing that.
Right. No, I mean, CJ, so I had still don't know why, but I got a blood clot from my groin down to my ankle. So I went from my leg and it broke loose and all that went into my lungs.
Ooh.
Now, the survival rate on the initial hit from that is pretty low. And somehow I survived that. And I'm sitting in a hospital bed and there's a lot going on. And I know in my mind, I'm a sharp guy. I've been around. I know in my mind, and I'm a nurse. I'm laying in an emergency room as an emergency room nurse. So and my wife's a nurse. And I know in my mind exactly the things that I can control, exactly what I need to do within the parameters of the things that I can control, all of the things that I haven't had control over, and what I needed to do to get that done to include the help I needed. And I got up out of that bed. It was June 3rd of 2018. It's the last time I took a drink. So it's what, 6.5 years. And it was the last time I took a drink. I was in the worst physical condition of my life. I let myself go after I retired. And I needed to have some conversations with some people to get them back in my life, and I needed to have some conversations with some people to get them out of my life. And I had to change a lot of things. And that's a sentinel moment. What I don't want people to have to be laying in a hospital bed with somebody going, you were a quarter of an inch away from dying. Yeah. If this clot was here, you wouldn't have lived. I don't want to be that guy. And I don't want anybody else to be that guy. What I want people to understand is that your life doesn't have to be this big giant sine wave of all this way up, way down, way up. You can have a nice, smooth existence when you're getting the help. You're a basketball guy. Kara Lawson is the basketball coach for Duke University.
Oh, yeah.
The girls' basketball. And she did a 2-minute and 49-second presentation to her team. And they videoed it, and it's on YouTube, and it went viral. Now, she did it right off the cusp, but the title of the video is Handle Hard Better. And she says, it's not going to get easy. There is no easy bus. As soon as you master something, the next level of hard will come. Life is just hard. Don't sit around waiting on the easy bus. Learn how to handle hard better. So I encourage you to, Carol, Karlawson, Kara Lawson, basketball coach, Duke's women's basketball coach. Google it. Google the speech. It's on there. It's called Handle Hard Better. It'll be the best 2 minutes and 49 seconds you ever spent starting your day.
Yeah, definitely something that I'm going to look into, because you are right. It reminds me of that old phrase, every new level has a new devil. So it almost seems as though as you level up in life, it comes with the territory. And I guess in your case too, where it's like you started to level up and you're like, okay, now I'm the top dog. I'm the leader, right? And now that I'm here, I got more issues I got to deal with. And it just seems like every single time you go up, it's like, okay, I got to deal with these new issues. I got these other problems. And you're right. Life doesn't necessarily get easier. It almost, the way I kind of see it too, my philosophy is that because you've lived and you figured out certain problems, you now hit new platforms, and the old problems of yesterday, they might still be hard, but they just don't seem that way. It's almost like a numbing thing where as you start to just keep going up and higher and higher and higher, you're just like, okay, cool, I can deal with that. It's not an issue anymore. But the new hard, pretty difficult and it's pretty challenging. However, if I take the tools that help me to get here, maybe I can apply it to this new platform and start to work on that and start to level up. And this new hard is difficult, but I got the tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. The more you handle hard, the better you get at handling hard. The next hard is easier and easier and easier. Because I'm telling you, it doesn't run out. I lost my mother a year ago Thanksgiving. So just
sorry to hear that.
She had a great life. 89 years. I think that we'd all change stuff in life, I guess, a little bit here and there, but her biggest blessing was that her mind was like she was 25 years old, and
wow.
We got to have great conversations right to the very end. So it seems fabulous. But where was I going with that? She, she was a huge proponent of trying. Well, she wanted to keep things simple, but she was a huge proponent because it was just her and I. That's the beginning of the book. If you get through that. It was just her and I. So that really screws up your parental relationship when it's just you and your mother, especially as a boy.
Yeah.
It becomes a corporation. and with the size of our bank account, it became a corporation of survival, right? So when kids were working summer jobs and buying really cool sneakers and hats and that kind of thing, I was signing the checks over to my mom to get the checkbook balance. So
yeah.
That kind of thing. And so you learn at certain ages of who needs to be around you. So to your point, and we're going to go back to this again, to your point, as you're leveling up, as somebody once told me, when you start to soar with the eagles, then people start shooting at you. And so there's a lot there around you. And so you have to evaluate, we got to learn people and you got to evaluate things. And I guess what I was saying about my mom is that, she always believed that to trust your gut instinct, your first instinct's probably always your right instinct. And as we navigate, right, think about how many times, I hate to use this example because sometimes I lose the female audience because it's way too prevalent in our society, but it's so true that if you talk to a woman that has been assaulted, physically assaulted, in whatever way, most all of them will tell you that their gut told them that they were in trouble at a point in time where they could have gotten out of it.
Interesting.
And they overrode it. And I think in life in general, our gut instincts they're there for a reason. It's the primal portion of us. And our gut instincts are there to keep us alive, figuratively, to keep us alive. And we override them. And ego, we kind of hedged on this. For your men audience, and I think you probably have a pretty good male audience.
Yeah.
Guys, you got to get over yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, you know what? If you scrub your ego, you get rid of that little bit of arrogance, and you stop being, stop machoing up and flexing. If you stop doing that, you'll have better girlfriends, you'll have better friends, and you're gonna be more successful out in the world on the back end. Sometimes you can get in there and scrape and scrounge and punch and throw elbows and figurative and literally and advance. But if you do it that way, when you pop out on the top, there's nobody else on the top. Your glass house is completely built, and you're an asshole.
Yeah.
And guess what? If you're an asshole at 35, you don't get to go back and undo that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the saddest part about that is, I guess I'm at that age now where I'm starting to realize, okay, I got to be humble. It's like, you know what, these different things like life lessons, you really start to see them come to a head around this age. I guess in my early 30s, I started to make peace with the fact that I'm not invincible. I'm not Superman. I don't have it all figured out, and it kind of like my late 20s, I really started to dive deeper into that just because a lot of it was just fueled by ego, right? And the older I get, the less fueled by ego I am. And in starting this podcast and having some of these wonderful conversations like I'm having with you, the more you realize when you're talking to an expert, it's humbling, right? Because you're like, fuck, man, I thought I had this figured out. I don't know shit. Like earlier today, I was talking to a guy that specializes in marriage counseling. And I'm like, wow, there's so much that I need to work on there too. And to your point, I think the one thing that kind of scares me is growing older and being arrogant. And you do see it with certain guys who think they have it figured out. And it's scary because you can see that they're standing on a house of cards, man. And at any time, it could just come and be completely destroyed. And all you need is a strong, like, gust of wind. You don't need a lot. And that's one of the things where I completely agree with you, where I do feel that letting go of the ego, surrendering yourself, coming out palms up, being like, hey, man, I need help. It's worth it. It's worth it. And it's something that definitely can change your life for the better.
Yeah. And it's, quite frankly, when you ask for help, the people that will be the most influential, that have the most to give you, whatever that is. If you're trying to work your way through a corporation, there's people that have eyes on future talent and they pull people up, right? And they give you opportunities. If you're humble and you're asking for help, there will be people whispering in the corner, oh yeah, he's got to have help. The people running the show have been through this gamut, and they go, that makes you even higher potential and somebody that I want to put into my accession planning because they're willing to ask for help. And if they ask for help, it's continuous learning. And if they have continuous learning, they're gathering knowledge at a 2 times or 3 times rate of the average arrogant person. Arrogance and ego slow you down.
Yeah.
And you don't accelerate in learning. You don't, your toolkit does not get fuller, and it slows you down. And then, the crescendo moment comes where you pop out and you're out in the open, alone and unafraid, and you're naked, and and nobody's wanted to help you because you probably stomped on them, tromped on them, or done something. Mm-hmm. And so now you're all by yourself, and then you are screaming for help, and there's nobody there to pick you up and dust you off. So just be really, really careful with that.
Yeah. One of the questions I have, though, for a veteran coming back from doing combat, let's say he is on the brink of retiring or just coming back to day-to-day life, like, civilian life. What is the one thing that you find as far as commonalities go that they need to work on to just kind of come back and be in the best mental space possible?
I appreciate that question because that's kind of the work, right? the vet rep work or stuff that I do. I mean, I really appreciate that question. Coming out of the military it's like being institutionalized. It's kind of like being in prison.
Yeah.
Right? When you're in prison, there's a routine, there's everything expected, there's rules, all those kind of things. And in the military, it's quite the same. But there's some things in the military that are really hard to replicate in the civilian world. One of those is this camaraderie, this teamwork, this bonded by the same core values that you live. If the core value is integrity, we all hold ourselves to that. You can't lie. You can't take shortcuts. You got to do follow the orders, fix the airplane the right way, do all of these things, right? Because it matters. It's a life and death thing at some level. And so that stuff matters. And so when you come out, you're coming out from your team, your purpose. There's absolutely no problem knowing what your purpose is every day when you get on and put on a uniform and it says United States, whatever, Marine Corps, Air Force, Army, whatever it says. And on the other side, your name.
Yeah.
And you'll see that most veterans, when they get out, they want to work for places that they got a shirt.
Yeah.
And it says something on it, McDonald's even, it doesn't matter, right? They want to identify with something and they want purpose. And so finding this purpose is difficult because the civilian institutions, most of them, they're monetarily driven. Even the nonprofits are monetarily driven, and they're driven by a product and a profit, a profit and loss statement. And somewhere in there is people. And so I think our country's probably been void of true leadership development for probably 2 generations, which is rough. And when you have that, what we've created through our formal schoolings, higher education, all those kind of things, what we've created is hyper managers, and we've rewarded arrogance and narcissism. And so if you think about somebody that's arrogant, somebody that's narcissistic, hasn't been given any formal mentorship or informal mentorship in leadership, yet they've been trained to be hyper managers, right? Where's the human touch? Where's the ability to navigate through an organization, read the people, read their emotions, read their needs, read what makes them tick, what makes them stay, and understand what kind of environment they need, and have you as the leader not only be able to articulate proper vision and direction so that people feel comfortable in your leadership and that you're taking care of them, but to also make them feel safe and create an environment that then they can be productive, because that's the way it works. Instead, we manage spreadsheets and those type of things. So in the veteran transition, what we're used to is we take care of ourselves and we take care of our people and we take care of our soldiers and we take care of our airmen and we take care of our Marines and we take care of our sailors. And we do that because they might be on your right, they might be on your left. They have to have the best training. We rely on each other. You get in a civilian institution, it's a meat grinder, man. And we think everybody's a savage, right? You show up 5 minutes late for a meeting. For us, that's disciplinary action. For you, it's just okay. So this transition thing really it's a dual faceted thing. It really takes employers and organizations to understand what the veterans need and create an environment that's helpful for them to transition. And it also takes the veterans to understand that when they walk into these rooms, that they're in a different culture and they need to spend the time that it takes to learn that culture and to assimilate into it. And if they can't, then they need to move. And unfortunately, 50% of veterans leave their first job in the first year, and 65 on average, and up to 80% are gone in 2 years. Well, it's this phenomenon that I just described. So Vet Ready, what I do is I try to work with non-veteran run organizations to help them understand how to create these environments. Because if you get veterans on board and you've got the right environment for them to help reassimilate, they'll stay forever. And then you get a lot of cool stuff, man. Free stuff. You get a person that's had formal and informal leadership training. You get a person that's organized, strategic thinkers, problem solvers. They do all that stuff. I told the corporate CEOs, I said, just take a dozen to half a dozen veterans and put them in a room and give them your hardest problem. They'll have it solved, legitimately solved, with all the solutions, all the ways to implement it.
Yeah.
Well, because that's what we do. That's how we're trained, and we do that stuff on the fly. So it's really hard, CJ.
Yeah.
My 10 years out has been tougher than my 30 years in some ways.
Wow. But it does make perfect sense, because I guess I never viewed it from that perspective, but you're right. It's like here, civilian life, you show up 5 minutes late, no big deal, whatever. There is no reprimanding. There are no consequences. You see it all the time. It's kind of like, hey, you know what? This truck was late. And that being said, it's kind of a different approach to life. Whereas if you're serving, I could imagine it's kind of like, okay, you do that, there's going to be some dire consequences.
What do you think would happen is if you got an email that said, your Amazon delivery scheduled for Wednesday will now be on Friday because of a delay. Click this button to get 50% of your money back.
Yeah, it's...
How many... You wouldn't get the email anymore.
Yeah.
Your stuff would be there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a completely different approach, and it makes more sense, but the world does not work like that. It's like it makes sense, but it doesn't.
But it doesn't make sense to us, right?
Yeah.
Because we're into a new world where we know it works. It's the Department of Defense is not a small entity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we know the structure works, and we come out and we go, you need structure. And they're like, no, structure is boring, or, that drives us crazy. The other thing is that the Napoleonic, the organizational chart in civilian organizations, people look at that that's their ladder. That's what they're climbing, right?
Yeah.
That person's above me. How do I get to the person above me? Organizational charts in the military are built for chain of command so that you know who to get your direction from, and who to give feedback to. That's all. It's just a communication thing. Organizational charts in civilian organizations are career progression charts where you look at it and how do I get to the top?
Yeah, it's a dog-eat-dog situation. Like even at my job, they're just like, same deal. It's kind of like you go from coordinator, supervisor, manager, director onto CEO or whatever. And a lot of people are just, it's like an internal fighting and bickering to the point where it's like, egos are like probably the biggest thing, or it's just like, okay, this guy wants that guy's job and now he's butthurt that he didn't get that guy's job. And it's, hey, how come you don't apply to move up like they told me? I'm like, well, I don't want a salary because I like working overtime. And it's kind of like we all got personal agendas and vendettas, whereas it seems like in the military, it's almost like one big cohesive unit, right? Versus, out here, it's just kind of like, well, what works best for you? And you got personal issues and you got your personal schedule and this, that, and we'll work around it. But it really does seem like when you want something done, I would rather have that militaristic approach to it because it seems like, no, we're not here to fuck around. We're just here to get the job done.
When I, during COVID, my graduate work is all in disaster management. So I'm a disaster manager. So I'm the guy that, tells you which way to drive when the hurricane's coming or how to evacuate during fires in California.
Yeah.
Well, all of this stuff is very interesting to me, the natural disasters, because I just kind of watch it. But yeah, I ran all the COVID operations for a college here in Billings for a college during COVID for about 13 months. I just, I helped him work through that. Well, I built, to do that, you build out your incident command structure, which is basically just your military structure. And we ran it that way. Within 2 weeks, CJ, people came up and said, when this is over with, can we just keep doing stuff this way? You guys get it. We go, man, everything just gets done. And we have like real meetings where there's like objectives and people get assigned tasks and they have to report back at the next meeting and stuff has to be done. I said, yeah. I said, that's what this is about. And there's no BS and, there's no, an hour-long meeting and people scratching their heads like, what did I do for the last hour?
Yeah, because honestly, I'll sit in some of our meetings and I'm like, why are we doing this? And nobody ever gets to the root cause of why we do the things that we do. And that's very much a corporate structure kind of, oh God, like I don't even understand what the agenda is sometimes. It's like, what's the prime objective? And nobody knows. Nobody knows. Everybody comes out of the meetings. They're like, what are we supposed to do? I'm like, I don't know, man. Just keep doing what we've been doing. Because nobody has any idea, like, are you supposed to go left or right? I'm like, they didn't really specify. So let's just get the job done. And then whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. So now you see the dilemma when you come out of that structure. And we crave it. I mean, we really, really, there's a lot of people that their military time will be the pinnacle of their life as far as accomplishment. And it's because it's the most, it's the most they've ever contributed to something. It's the most that they've ever put into something and that kind of thing. And quite frankly, if you do it right, I mean, you're all in. And that's to include you're all in with the health of your knees and your back and your neck and your shoulders and all the things that, you do 30 years and all that stuff hurts.
I could imagine.
And so, there's a sacrifice beyond even your last day on active duty. So yeah, it doesn't make us any better than anybody. It doesn't make us any worse than anybody. Does it make us unique? I know that if an employer hires somebody that's deaf in their right ear and in a wheelchair, they know what the bathroom needs to look like, what the elevator needs to look like, where they need to sit, what to tell the staff, how to get them out of the building in an evacuation. They know all of that stuff. But when a veteran walks in, they have no clue. And that we need to change.
And as far as the change, like culturally, what is one of the things that you want to see kind of implemented? If you could change one thing right now, like a systematic change to just make it easier for a veteran to come in, what would that look like? Like a special program? Like I know you got yours, but what's something that you would, just a common thing that you see across the board?
Yeah, I think that you could take what we're doing with Vet Ready, and I think you could probably, formally, nationally, I think that you could probably amend the American Disabilities Act and put a chapter in there for companies on the basics to do to bring on to onboard veterans and to keep them for the environmental pieces. But I guess if I was to change one thing, CJ, is what I would do is there is no, the military knows how to bring you in. They know how to sustain you, train, equip, organize you. They know how to put you out, but they don't care. The day that you walk out, you turn in your ID card and you leave. They don't care about you anymore. And there's nothing there. It's just a straight drop off. It's like a Alice in Wonderland movie where you open a door, you step through the door, you close the door, and when you turn around, you're standing on a 1-foot board, and below you is a 100,000-foot drop, and you can't see the other side. And you've got to navigate that. Somewhere in society, there's got to be a way to get a hold of veterans before they get out. There's people trying to do this, but we shouldn't have to do it through a veteran service organization. This country is good at a lot of things. We could get good at it. For some reason, when there's an empty hotel, we fill it full of people except the homeless veterans. When it's extra food and money, we give it to people except for the veterans.
Yeah.
And it's weird. And then people say there's a Veterans Administration, but those are old archaic systems that were built in World War II that haven't been updated. Yeah. And so there's a huge gap. And so now there's 64,000 veteran service organizations in our country trying to fill this gap.
Jeez. But the one thing that I don't understand is how come, do you have any suspicions as to why that doesn't exist? Because it almost seems like, I mean, I've read it before, and sometimes like you hear about like immigrants getting all this, or refugees, they get all these different perks, and all these other people get different perks. You even got the transgender people who get different perks. And I'm like, but why not the veterans? Like they went out, they served the country, and it seems like they just got shafted. Is there any suspicion on your part that this is done purposefully or done in a way that's kind of malicious? Because it doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't.
First of all, the squeaky wheel gets oiled, and veterans aren't ones to be, my son said, when did you become a hat guy? And I said, when people started to forget. So, for instance, the Department of Defense used to let us wear our uniforms when we traveled. So there was a presence of military people in every airport that you went to, every bus station that you went to, in the grocery stores, all that stuff. You saw uniforms because people weren't. They said, stop doing that. Well, I think that's crap. I think it's good for our country to see people because they understand that there's people out there doing the work. That's number one. Number two is we're our own worst enemies. We hide out. We don't say we're veterans, and we don't ask for anything because the first two things that are beat out of us and when we join our service is the words I and me. We're not allowed to say those anymore. It's we and us. We give the worst job interviews that we've ever given in the history of man because HR job interviews start off like this. Give me a time when you led people to accomplish a really difficult task. And you go, well, when I was in Iraq, we blah, 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 blah. And they go, no, I want to hear about a time that you did that. I don't do things independently. I do things in a team format. And so we're behind the power curve. So that needs to be better understood, and veterans need to do a better job. And I'm not saying it's all on the veteran. Society, CJ, has a perception of veterans that I think is, well, they were in the Army, so they should be able to handle it. Yeah. Whereas maybe some of those other factions look like they need help because they can't handle it. But when you've got up to 22 veteran suicides a day in this nation, we're not doing a good job of handling it.
Yeah. Well, that just did. It seems like, I mean, veterans are the most silent and the other ones are the loudest, but I kind of feel like the veterans require the most help. And I think, I mean, maybe this is a selfish view from my perspective, but I kind of feel like they deserve the most help, out of everybody in that group. Like, there's some people that are walking around that think they're cats and dogs. I'm like, that's fine and dandy. However, this guy protected the country. So I think we should help him first. And if you want to be a cat, that's cool. We'll get you a costume. But I kind of feel like it's more important. And it's one of those things that unfortunately is falling. I don't think it's falling on deaf ears, but to your point, and even in your story, you admitted the fact that you didn't want to reach for help. However, now that you're here and now that you're telling the story, are you seeing that more and more veterans are reaching out to you like, hey, bro, just want to let you know something. Like, is it possible for you to kind of help me, get me started down the right path? Because I feel like a lot of guys are just looking for you. And in the same way that you guys work as a team, it's almost like now you're the team leader again in a different aspect, but you still are kind of there shining that path.
Yeah, it's we operate differently. I mean, when you run into somebody's another veteran, doesn't matter what service they came from, they're your brother and sister immediately. They work from up here down. I mean, if they're going to lose your trust or something, they're going to have to do that. But immediately, just based on the fact that they served, they're on your team, and that opens the door to have those conversations. But we need to congregate more. And yeah, if there's ever probably a subset of our society that can truly define being too humble, it's veterans. Mm-hmm. And you have to speak up. I've got a buddy he's a 2-time Purple Heart recipient. Wow. And I said, why don't you tell people that? He goes, I don't need to. And I said, yes, you do. You need to tell people. Because we're not doing ourselves any favors. Yeah. We're not. And people need to know. So, I will tell you, all veterans are not created equal. You could put another guy on the show here that goes, Dave's absolutely crazy. I think wearing the hat's the stupidest thing in the world. And he's not being humble, or he's trying to get, 10 cents off his coffee or on it. That's not my purpose. Maybe there is veterans out there that do that. I'm sure. I'm positive that there's veterans out there that do that. But the ones that aren't saying things and they're not wearing the hats and they're not out there talking, they're not giving back. That's the title of the first book. Giving Back, Life and Leadership from the Farm to the Combat Zone. And the reason that I did that book like that is to open the door for other people to give back. And you can start giving back at 33, by the way, CJ. You got stuff to give back. And maybe it's 5-year-olds. Maybe it's your kid's basketball team. I mean, You got things, right? And you need to be doing that constantly. And, when I was a kid I was, from the time I was 0 to 5 was the late 60s. So I've got a lot of memories of hippies, and it's kind of cool watching. Well, I couldn't grab the guy soon enough. There was a black guy the other day had a huge freaking fro, man, huge. That makes me feel so good because it's just a total flashback to those, late 60s, early 70s, man. And, the guys used to call them hair rich, man. They were big combs, and their hair was so long and so big, they'd just stick them in the back of their hair. Yeah. When their hair kind of got messed up, they'd flick their hair and then they'd poke it in the back of their hair, and it was like cool. So, I kind of, I grew up in that time, and in that time, people volunteered. Yeah. Community had Red Crosses that volunteered, and there's a book called Bowling Alone, and the whole book is predicated on kind of what I just mentioned and today, and the fact that people used to go to bowling alleys and bowl in league. And the magic of the league is that every week you bowled against a different team. So if the league had 60 people in it, at least twice during the course of the league, you were going to bowl with that team, which meant, 3 games of bowling, you're going to get to know them and where they're from, what they do, and that kind of stuff. There's going to be an interaction. And there's a camaraderie that goes along with that. And out of that comes volunteerism and a sense of community. Now people bowl alone with headsets on.
Yeah. Yeah. See that quite a bit.
So what changed?
I think it's a societal thing. I feel that a lot of it has to do with the technology, because I've interviewed other people too, like a dating specialist, and I asked her, I'm like, what do you think is the worst thing going on as far as like the male-female connection? She's like, it's the fact that everybody's running around with these AirPods in, right? So nobody can even talk to each other. Like it's interesting too, because now you got the algorithms on social media and they tell people whatever it is that keeps them hooked to the tablet or to the phone. And not just that, it's like as far as their sensory perception kind of goes, they got the earbuds in, they got the visual stimulated, and they're a lot of times just stimulating lies. Social media will tell them any narrative that they want to hear. So the thing is now, I think we're probably living in, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's narcissistic, but it's almost as if our relationships are now to our phones. And that's kind of where I get scared, where I'm like, I tell my kid, like, hey, get off the tablet. We're going to go walk around in circles or something. Because I don't want you glued to that thing, because I don't think it's good for you. And I feel like that's probably the biggest thing that we see in society right now.
Let me give you some stats for you to kind of consume for your listeners to consume. So today in the world, about 990 million texts will be sent today. Mankind has spent, since we could talk, working on perfecting our communication skills verbally, because it is the number one way we communicate, right? We communicate. Sure. We don't anymore. We take something that we've been using or worrying about or trying to perfect for about 300 years, writing, and we've replaced talking with writing as the number one form of communication. So when people invented this texting thing, that's why they invented emojis, so that you can put your facial expression on there, because if you're talking to me, I can see that you're smiling right now, right?
Yeah.
If you were frowning and looking at me, I'd go, do you disagree with me, CJ?
Yeah.
But no, I laugh because you're having this sense of realization as to, oh my goodness, I put the smiley emoji and I put the little poop emoji and I put, these things, and I got the sick emoji and the money emoji. I've got all of these things that I have to attach to my writing so that I don't offend anybody, because we've lost a whole portion of communication by not being face to face.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's brutal, because I almost feel like younger generations don't even know how to talk to themselves in groups anymore. Like I see them in restaurants and they're all teenagers and they're just sitting down and they just all are on their phones, right? But on the flip side too, it also gives me hope, because I do see a lot of kids just hanging out and sometimes they won't even have their phones out,
Yeah, that school in New Jersey just had the kids, they magnetically seal their phones when they go to school now.
That's awesome.
And they interviewed the teachers and the students were the first ones to say, man, we're starting to have some conversations with other people around us, and they're already seeing this thing called social interaction. Another box, right? This was their great box. Right? And now somebody goes, what's that box? And then you go, I don't know, but it's been there for about 150 years. And you open it up and you're like, oh, social interaction. Like if we go to lunch together and I don't have my phone, after we order, we have to actually find something to talk about.
Yep. Just like the good old days, man. But the communication piece, I think, is huge. And honestly, Dave, as our time comes to an end here, I love what you're doing when it comes to the veteran work. I love the fact that you wrote the book. I love the fact that you're trying to really bridge this gap. And I mean, it seems like you're a one-man army right now, but with more people joining up, I'm excited to see what the future holds. But what are your future plans? And are there any more books in the work? Like, where can we find you?
So I have 2 books, right? So the second book is called When the Cows Lie Down, Why People Quit You, the Leader. So we'll read that one. That has a little bit about narcissism and arrogance in it and some other things. People can find me at maxfabconsulting.com. So MAXFAB consulting.com. Everything's there. my blogs are there. I have my own podcast. You can get the podcast episodes, and you can get the books there. And then you can look into some of the people that I speak for. You know, I speak professionally. I'll come and I'll do some motivational stuff for you, or I'll have a little deeper, darker speech. I do a speech called "Closing the 25-Yard Gap," and it's all on this human interaction and communication thing that we talked about. So, and I'm more than happy to come and do that. In the speaking world, I'd say that my fees are extremely reasonable. So, yeah, I think that you know, if you sign me up, you always get a little bonus, and you probably get some free books out of it and that kind of thing. So it's all cool. But the next thing with the veteran work is I really, CJ, my roadblock now is really having organizations be open enough that they want to spend some time on their culture and a small investment with a huge return on investment for them, especially in their workforce, to invest in, in listening to the philosophy and the programmatics. And that's been a little bit of an uphill climb. So we're going to change our strategy a little bit, get a little more targeted. It really takes two to make it work. And so we're looking for dance partners.
100%. And I'll be sure to have all the links in the description. Again, Dave, value your work, love what you're doing, love your message. And I can't wait to put this episode out there. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, like I said, links are going to be in the description. And make sure to get the book. I'll also have that there too. Dave, thank you for coming on and look forward to talking with you again.
Amen. Out here.